At this time, we will begin our service with military honors. I ask those who are able to rise. If you are currently serving in the armed forces or have been honorably discharged, you may perform the hand salute. Thank you. You may be seated.
On behalf of the President of the United States Army, and a grateful nation, please accept this flag as a symbol of our appreciation for your loved one's honorable and faithful service.
musicians of the Cleveland Orchestra. Dear friends, I'm Richard Block, Senior Rabbi Emeritus of the Temple Tifereth Israel. Together with my colleagues, Rabbi Jonathan Cohn, Senior Rabbi, and Cantor Kathy Sebo, it is my sad privilege to officiate today as we mourn the death and celebrate the life of Morton Mandel. In his sorrow, Job cried out, Adonai Natan v'Adonai lakach, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. God has given, God has taken away. Blessed be the name of God. An ancient people, we are well acquainted with grief and with the valley of shadows. Death and sorrow are not strangers to us. Yet the centuries have taught us that a good name endures beyond the grave and that there is strength in faith. With Job we say, Adonai Natan. God, you have given. In Mort, you gave us a loved one who will not be forgotten. For all that was good and enduring in Mort's life, we offer the deepest thanks of our hearts. Adonai lakach. God, you have taken away. We pray for the strength to turn our broken hearts into an altar of trust, before which we acknowledge your sovereignty and love. As now we say, Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach. Blessed be the name of God, now and forever. For Mort's love that united us in life and which death cannot sever, for his companionship that we shared along life's path and which continues through the tenderness of memory, for the gifts of Mort's heart and mind that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all these and more, we give our thanks to God. In this time of grief, we listen to the voice of our sacred scriptures that brings us the ancient yet ever new message of God's nearness. It tells of our kinship with the Creator, in light as in darkness, in joy as in sorrow, in life as in death. Psalm 1. Happy are those who have not followed the counsel of the wicked or taken the path of sinners or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They're like a tree planted beside streams of water and that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades and whose fruit always flourishes. Adonai, who may abide in your house, who may dwell in your holy mountain? Those who are upright, who do justly, who speak the truth within their hearts, who do not slander others or wrong them or bring shame upon them, who scorn the lawless but honor those who revere God, who give their word and come what may, do not retract, who do not exploit others, who do not take bribes. Those who live in this way shall never be shaken. Cantor Sebo will now chant the beautiful Hebrew words of the 23rd Psalm.
Yismor leDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, Binot asher yarbitzein yamem menuchot yanachaleni, Nafshi shovev, Yanacheni v'maglei tzedek lema'an shemo. Gam ki reich begit al mavet, lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha umishantecha hema yanachamoni. Taroch lefanai shulchan neged tzorirai. Di shanta vashemen roshi kusiri vaya. Ach tov chesed yirdifuni kol yamei chayai. Vishaviti biveit Adonai leorech yamim.
I invite you to join me. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
Words of comfort from our tradition. Adonai ma'on ata hayita lanu bedor vador. Lord, you have been our dwelling place from one generation to another through all generations. Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, you are God. You turn men and women to contrition and say, return, children of humanity. For 1,000 years in your sight are but as yesterday when it is past, and as a watch in the night. You carry them away as with a flood. They are as asleep. In the morning, we are like grass that grows up. In the morning, we flourish. In the evening, we cut down. We are withered. We end as a tale that is told. As the 80 years and 10, or even by reason of our strength, 80 years come to an end, yet is their pride but travail and vanity. For we are speedily gone, and we fly away. So teach us to number our days, that we may get us a heart of wisdom. Satisfy us in the morning with thy mercy, that we may rejoice and be glad all our days. Make us glad according to the days wherein thou hast afflicted us, according to the years wherein we have seen evil. Let thy work appear unto thy servants, and thy glory upon their children. And let the graciousness of the Lord and God be upon us. U'ma'aseh yadeinu konnenehu, yea, the work of our hands, establish forever. Our tradition teaches that Solomon produced the book of Ecclesiastes, and there we read, "There is a time and season for everything under the heaven, lakol zman ve'et lechol chefetz tachat hashemesh." A time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to uproot the planted, a time to slay and a time to heal, a time to destroy and a time to build, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast stones and a time to gather stones, a time to embrace and a time to shun embraces, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to preserve and a time to discard, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to be silent and a time to speak out, a time to love and a time to despise, a time to wage war and a time to make peace.
As my 2018 retirement approached, and my wife Susie and I were planning to relocate to Palo Alto and Jerusalem, Mort sought assurance that I would always be his rabbi, and that when the time came, I would officiate at his funeral. I promised that I would, and that I'd come from the ends of the earth, if need be, to honor the latter promise, on one condition. "What's the condition?" he asked. I replied, "I have to outlive you." Given the extraordinary vitality and longevity with which the Mandel siblings were blessed, I was only half kidding. We clergy are well acquainted with mortality and with the truth of human existence, that life makes no promises. We are not guaranteed good health or happiness, success, prosperity, or length of years, though if we're fortunate, we may enjoy these in some measure, as Mort did in such abundance. What life gives us is a series of days, indeterminate in number, each a priceless, irrecoverable opportunity to give and receive love, to make the world a little more kind and just, to fashion a life of meaning, goodness, and purpose. As Mort put it in his remarkable book, It's All About Who, I've come to believe that all of this, my entire effort in both the for-profit and nonprofit parts of my life, has been a search for fulfillment, to feel I had done something significant with my life. I think of the world, he wrote, as having a huge number of candles, and only a small percentage are lit. I know now that I have devoted a big part of my life to lighting as many candles as I can. To light a candle is to make the world a better place. And he concluded, there are so many exciting and wonderful things to do, so many more candles to light, so much more journey in my search for meaning. The torch is in my hand, and I intend to hold it as high as I can for as long as I can. And wow, did he ever. If we are blessed, in addition to days, life gives us each other. Dear ones and friends with whom to share joys and sorrows, our soul's companions on life's perilous, miraculous, unpredictable passage to eternity. Mort dedicated his book to the loving memory of his parents, Simon and Rose, his exceptional wife and life partner, Barbara, his wonderful, loving children, Amy and Tom and Stacy, his brothers, Jack and Joe, who were his two best friends and lifelong partners in business and philanthropy, and to all others who helped make his dreams come true. Highlights of Mort's unsurpassed, innumerable achievements, honors, and beneficiaries can be found in the Cleveland Jewish News and elsewhere. Some of Mort's most significant nonprofit and business partners will share memories with us this afternoon, as will Mort and Barbara's beloved children. Mort and Barbara were married in February 1949 by Rabbi Abba Hillel Silver, whose name graces the sanctuary, and who had also confirmed Barbara. It was evident to their children that they adored each other, that their relationship was suffused with love, mutual respect, admiration, and considerable humor and fun, as well as tireless efforts together and independently to repair the world. Reflecting on his origins, Mort often shared fond memories of his mother, whom he described as the single greatest influence on his life. He felt that he owed almost everything he became to her. Core values of integrity, respect, honesty, and generosity, highly effective habits, and a moral compass. Mort wanted to be able to look himself in the mirror and be proud of the person he saw. Mort and I became close during the last years of his brother Jack's life. Jack, a life trustee of the temple, was the eldest of the three brothers and a father figure to Mort. And as Jack declined, Mort felt his impending loss keenly. He wanted to be prepared for the eventuality with no detail left to chance. In every arena and endeavor, Mort was a dominant figure. But there comes a time when even a renowned business leader, visionary, and philanthropist needs spiritual support. When Mort did, he turned to me, and I will forever be humbled and grateful that he became my congregant, benefactor, mentor, confidant, partner, and friend. Simply put, I loved him. As so many experienced, Mort had exceedingly high expectations and could be tough. He was often simultaneously demanding and charming. But along with funds, he generously shared his time, talent, experience, and wisdom with those he trusted, respected, and assisted. He used to say, "If you want my advice, ask me for money. If you want my money, ask me for advice." It meant a great deal to Mort to memorialize his beloved brothers, as he did most recently after Joe's death in 2016 at 102, with a naming gift to the Florence and Joseph Mandel Jewish Day School. After Jack died at 99 in 2011, Morton initiated a conversation that culminated in an historic transformational challenge grant to the temple and the dedication of our Jack and Lillian Mandel building. As we discussed the grant's terms over a period of months, Mort said, "Rick, I'm going to make this hard for you, but I'm doing it to help you succeed." He did, and he was right. This accords with an ancient rabbinic comment about Adam and Eve, humanity's first parents, describing Eve with a Hebrew phrase, ezer kenegdo, meaning helpful opponent. The famous 11th century commentator Rashi explained, when Adam was worthy of it, she was his helper. When necessary, she opposed him. Morton Mandel was our ezer kenegdo. At the first of a series of meetings among Mort and our top leadership, we set up coffee and pastries, including Mort's favorite, fig Newtons, but he didn't partake. As he was leaving, I asked if he'd like to take anything with him. He declined, but appreciated our hospitality and told us a story. Once when he was a little boy, his mother hosted friends for a card game, but nobody ate the bountiful baked goods she had prepared. Mort said to her, "You did all this and no one touched it. You must be upset." She replied, "No one ate, but they saw." The refreshments showed her guests she cared about them. And this maternal lesson in generous hospitality and many others stuck with Mort and helped him become our teacher, inspiration, and guide. As the Temple Tomorrow project progressed, I was honored to introduce Mort to assembled congregants and guests on several occasions. With regard to Mort, adjectives and idioms exhaust themselves. Expressions like monumental figure, force of nature, larger than life, are both true and wholly inadequate to capture Mort fully or convey adequately our unbounded admiration and gratitude. But I did my rabbinic best. At one gathering, his eyes twinkling, Mort responded, "Rabbi, I enjoyed your comments about me. They could have been a little longer." Like many of us, Mort relished praise, and he thought it well-deserved. But he also said on many occasions, then and elsewhere, that he truly felt he received more than he gave from his beneficence. In ancient Jewish texts, we find the concept of a good death, one that comes at the end of a long and fruitful life and involves minimal pain and suffering. The rabbis knew well that not everyone leaves the world that way, and inferred that such an ending was a mark of special righteousness. In that sense, Mort's death was a good one. He lived fully, with characteristic decisiveness to the very end. If he had to die, he wanted to do it at home, so a medical transport took him to Florida for his brief final illness, one without the need for pain medication until the final day. And he spent his time there well, saying goodbye, expressing love, thanking people for the blessings they brought to his life. And ready at last to cede control and let go, Mort passed away peacefully, just as, when, and where he chose, surrounded by Barbara, Amy, Tom, and Stacy's loving presence. Mort's death leaves a gaping chasm in their lives and in ours, in our community, the Jewish people, and the world entire. Israel's President Rivlin, who called Barbara to express heartfelt condolences, called Mort a true mensch. Mort leaves behind something far more significant and lasting than a void. He bequeathed a radiant example of a life consummately well and exuberantly lived, one that enhanced and transformed the lives of countless individuals and institutions, communities and countries, and will continue doing so in perpetuity. Though our mourning is deep, our gratitude runs far deeper. A beautiful prayer reminds us, days pass and the years vanish, and we walk sightless among miracles. As tributes celebrating Mort's life and impact are shared now and evoke undoubtedly both tears and laughter, let us listen with eager eyes and open hearts for qualities of character to emulate, causes deserving support, persons needing a warm embrace, and opportunities to help repair some small corner of our beautiful but broken world. Today and in times to come, let us open our eyes and look for candles waiting to be lit. Let us ask ourselves, how shall I fill my precious fleeting days with meaning, purpose, and abiding worth? At the end of the day, indeed, at the beginning and end of each day, that question is Mort's ultimate gift and challenge to us. Our answers will illumine and enliven Mort's legacy and define our own, because it's all about who. Secher Tzadik Livracha, may Mort's memory be our eternal blessing. I'm pleased to invite the first of our speakers, Steve Hoffman, Vice Chair of the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Foundation, to come forward and share memories with us.
Mort was a proud American, a proud Clevelander, and a proud Jew. I'm here today to talk a little bit about the Jewish side of life. I have to begin by telling you that Mort was an unconditional lover of Israel, especially since the first trip he made with Barbara, I think right after the Six-Day War. And he eagerly joined in the effort to build the country, the economy, and ultimately the society, mainly today through the Mandel Foundation Israel. He met the leaders, but he loved being among the people, the religious, the secular, the Bedouin, Arab, and Druze citizens, all Israelis. Israel was at his core and in his heart. Mort was a builder, not in the Cleveland conventional sense, certainly not in the Builders Division of Federation's annual campaign, but a builder nevertheless. He built leaders. He built institutions. He did literally help build the homes of Jewish organizations and communities across the Jewish world. But his greatest gifts were not just the money to build buildings, no. The most precious gift was the way he would sit with the professional leader of an organization that caught his interest. And then he would become a thought partner with that leader. He'd want to know your challenges, your vision, what kept you up at night. And then he brought to bear all of his accumulated wisdom as a CEO, his gift as an organizational whiz kid. And he lifted up your vision, challenged you to think, to be creative. And when you really got excited about the possibilities, he'd say, I'll help you get it done. And he would, financially, and he'd help recruit the right people to get it done with you. And he did it over and over again. When Mort agreed to serve as president or a board chair, he didn't do it to preside. He devoted himself to being a leader in word and deed. He led by example, setting standards of giving and time commitment. He did so in his early 30s when he transformed the Cleveland JCC into a powerhouse with a first-class executive. He did it again when it came time to build the Mandel JCC in Beechwood. He did it by founding the World Confederation of JCCs in Jerusalem. He did it as president of the Jewish Community Centers of North America and the Council of Jewish Federations. Mort led the way for the Jewish Agency, put diaspora Jewish education on its agenda, beginning with an unprecedented international conference on Jewish education in 1984 in Jerusalem. And then he came home and recruited Chuck Ratner and launched Cleveland's own Commission on Jewish Continuity. We thought big, we started small and built and changed Jewish education in Cleveland, a process still going on 35 years later. He led a process that changed the value of and course of informal Jewish education in the Jewish Center movement through a critical commission process, and then a Mandel Center for Jewish Education inside the Jewish Community Centers of North America. And then he reached for all of American Jewish communal life with the Commission on Jewish Education in North America. Can you imagine? He brought together a Hasidic rabbi on the faculty of Harvard, the heads of all the denominational schools of rabbinical and educational training in America, the leading Jewish communal volunteers, philanthropists, and professionals, again, an unprecedented cast, and led them through a 2-year process resulting in a comprehensive plan, A Time to Act, which foreshadowed and stimulated many of the efforts we have 20 years later. He was known throughout the continent as Mr. Jewish Education. Mort also put the spotlight on the need to build a cadre of A players in Jewish professional positions. He stimulated Jewish Federations of North America to a bigger vision and funded it. Same with the Jewish community centers. He worked with Hebrew Union College for rabbis and Jewish educators, and he did it for volunteer and professional leaders in Cleveland and in Palm Beach. Contrary to what people think, Mort was not larger than life. He was a real person, a self-confident leader, one who understood that people with the right values, experience, and wisdom, no matter how busy in their professional or business lives, need to step forward and take on responsibility to lead the Jewish people. When the Almighty called to Abraham, he answered, Hineni, I am here. And so too with Mort. When the Jewish people called, he answered, Hineni. Mort built a foundation, literally and figuratively, to continue his work, to advance his vision, and we will do just that. Adine Seinsaltz, a modern sage, in his book Change and Renewal, cited a custom to invite one of the historical leaders of the Jewish people on each of the 7 days of Sukkot, the holiday we are now observing. These are called ushpizin, guests. They were Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, Moses, Aaron, and David. They are called the shepherds of Israel, for they shepherded the Jewish people. They are eminent historical leaders that did not belong to history alone. They are above history in that they continue to lead us through the generations long after their passing. They are present among us, not as memories from the past, but direct influences on our lives. We carry a part of them within ourselves. As we sit in the sukkah, as we invite ourselves to receive the guests, we meet ourselves, that essence of who these truly great leaders of Israel teach us to be. And so it will be with Mort. He now becomes part of our essences, our better selves. And next year, we'll be inviting Mort to join us in the sukkah.
I'm honored to introduce Barbara Snyder, president of Case Western Reserve University.
I'm honored to be here to speak about a truly extraordinary life, a great man, a good man, Mort Mandel. I treasured the years of our friendship, and I value all that I learned from him, about leadership and about life. Mort was renowned for his exceptional leadership in business and philanthropy, and when Mort and his brothers established the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Foundation, they committed to investing in people with the values, ability, and passion to change the world. And they did that all over the world and right here at Case Western Reserve. Mort talked about these gifts as investments in people, as they always were. Many of those investments were in education, because Mort understood the power of education to change the lives of the people who will change the world. The impact of Mort Mandel and the Mandel family on our university is so profound that if I were to list all of the investments here, we would be here a very long time. Instead, I want to tell you one story about a gift that Mort gave to the Case Western Reserve community that has nothing to do with names on a building, or an academic center, or an endowed professorship, or scholarships. Morton Mandel came to Adelbert College in 1939, which was part of Western Reserve University. He was a new freshman. He left after a year to work with his brothers after they bought their uncle's auto parts business, and soon after, the United States entered World War II. Mort felt compelled to join the patriotic effort. The Army recognized his intellect and sent him to not one, but 2 additional universities. Still, he lacked enough credits to complete his degree. After his discharge, Mort quickly rejoined his brothers in their then fledgling business, and as everyone knows, over the years, they turned that business into a global enterprise worth billions. At the same time, Mort and his brothers spent decades providing philanthropic support that changed the world. And yet, the desire for a diploma never left. In 2013, Mort published his book, It's All About Who, sharing the lessons he learned about leadership. And the Vice Provost for Undergraduate Education at our university evaluated his transcripts to determine whether, with the credits from those 3 universities, he would have enough to graduate. Not quite. He would have to complete a senior capstone project, which could be his book, but he would have to present his thesis to a faculty panel to earn the final credits. Morton Mandel, giant of industry and philanthropy, already had 12 doctoral degrees, including one from Case Western Reserve University. He could easily have decided that he didn't need an undergraduate degree, but Mort embraced the opportunity, and in April of 2013, he defended his thesis before a panel of our distinguished faculty to earn the final credits needed for his bachelor's degree. He could have elected to receive his diploma in a private ceremony or even in the mail. But again, Mort embraced the opportunity and chose to graduate with his class, the class of 2013. On the morning of commencement, he lined up, as all our students do, alphabetically, and marched in with his 22-year-old classmates. Many selfies were taken in the section of the M's that morning. And with his family in the audience, 74 years after beginning his studies, when his name was called, Mort walked across the stage to receive his diploma. He held it up in the air, and his fellow students rose to give him a spontaneous standing ovation. I have never seen it before, nor since. The graduates, their families, our faculty and staff will never forget it. And in that powerful moment, Mort gave our campus community a gift so precious it cannot be calculated in dollars. He showed us what education meant to him. A few years ago, I was preparing for Mort coming to campus to give a book talk, and I watched an interview of him on an Israeli news program about his book and about his thoughts on leadership. He said something similar to what Rabbi Block told you. Leaders who are good leaders and do good deeds light candles. There is a lot of darkness still in the world, and we need more people to light candles. I'm going to try and light as many candles as I can for as long as I live. Mort, you lit so many candles, they burn still in the lives of the people you touched. May his life continue to be an inspiration to us all.
Dr. Toby Cosgrove, past president, Cleveland Clinic.
Good afternoon. I'm Toby Cosgrove, a friend, mentee, and great admirer of Morton Mandel. Mort was a great man. It is an honor to have the opportunity to reflect on his many contributions and publicly express my appreciation and gratitude. His Horatio Alger rags to riches story has been well chronicled. His business leadership was celebrated by Peter Drucker, who considered him in the business leadership pantheon with Jack Welch and Andy Grove. Less well recognized is his contribution to the success and culture of the Cleveland Clinic. Early in my leadership journey, I reached out to Mort to learn from his experience and acquired wisdom. He was a great teacher. We met regularly for early breakfast in my office. He was always curious, optimistic, and encouraging. He shared with me his deep belief in the vital importance of leadership and hiring A players. Mort believed that better leaders made for a better world. He provided examples and reading material. Not surprising, the reading material was his book, It's All About Who. These lessons were invaluable to me as I built my team and refined it. He strongly advocated for killing yourself for the customers. I felt that that might be slightly off-putting to caregivers. We did, however, capture the essence of the idea by developing patients first as our North Star and mantra. Mort's philanthropy is legendary, supporting causes in Israel, the United States, and particularly in Cleveland. His support for the Cleveland Clinic, including cancer research, preventive medicine, and much more. The clinic shared Mort's belief in the vital importance of leadership development and the importance for its importance in the future of healthcare. The generosity of the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation enabled the creation of the Mandel Global Leadership and Learning Institute at the Cleveland Clinic. This institute will shape the future of healthcare by refining and inspiring leaders. Ultimately, it has the potential to benefit millions of patients worldwide. It is said when a great man passes, his memory and examples light the path for those that follow. We are deeply grateful to Morton Mandel for his wisdom, his counsel, and his support. He has helped light the path we will follow. Thank you, Mort.
Professor Asher Cohen, President of the Hebrew University of Jerusalem.
If I had to describe Morton Mandel, Zichrono Levracha, in one word, it would be, just like the President of Israel did, a mensch. There are a number of qualities we would like to see in people. Many have some of these qualities, but it is rare indeed to meet a person that has just about all of these qualities. Mort Mandel was one of these rare people. Mort was as smart as they come, and at the same time, as insightful as they come. He was a devoted husband and a family person that deeply understood the meaning and importance of family. He was a committed Jew, a proud Jew, that fully understood the true Jewish values. And he had incredible vision. Mort had an amazing compass to navigate in this world, and at its core was the desire to make the world a better world. Having all these qualities together made Mort Mandel a truly special person. A line from an Israeli poet, Natan Yonatan, expresses it very nicely. איפה יש אנשים כמו האיש הזה, which can loosely be translated as, where can we find men like this man? Mort Mandel was a mensch. From my perspective, as the president of the Hebrew University, I had a special window to observe how Mort made the world better. The humanities have for millennia been the backbone of the academic and cultural world. The humanities are the true infrastructure of academia, culture, and indeed society. One can get good education in all disciplines, but there is something quite special about being educated in the humanities. It teaches our students how to think in a critical fashion, how to analyze problems correctly. Our society, our culture needs the humanities to thrive. Unfortunately, in the last few decades, there seemed to be a progressive decrease in the number of people that are involved in the humanities. Morton realized the danger in this trend and was determined to reverse it. With the help of the Mandel Foundation and active involvement of Morton, we at the Hebrew University first created the Mandel Skolyon Research Center that had two important goals: to prepare leaders in the humanities and to encourage interdisciplinary research of the humanities with other disciplines. We later established the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel School for Advanced Studies in the Humanities that created a prestigious program for graduate students in the humanities. The outcome of this support is nothing short of spectacular. It dramatically transformed the humanities at the Hebrew University, in Israel, and indeed in the world. Many of the Skolyon graduates have now leading positions in universities around the world. There has been a dramatic increase in the interest to enroll as graduate students in the humanities. And amazingly, after many years of steady decline in the number of undergraduate students in the humanity, not only did we stop this decline, in the last 2 years, we see sizable increase in the number of undergraduate students studying the humanities at the Hebrew University. The humanities are thriving again. And I can say without any hesitation that this dramatic transformation would not have occurred without Morton Mandel. Sadly, Morton Mandel passed away and will no longer live with us. And yet, I would like to end with two optimistic observations. First, Morton Mandel wanted to make the world better. And the world today is better because of Morton Mandel. Second, Morton Mandel left behind a foundation that will continue to make the world better. I cannot think of a better legacy. Yehi Zichro Baruch. May his memory be blessed.
Professor Yehuda Reinhartz, President, Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation. Oh, sorry, Scott, I'm coming to you next.
Barbara, Amy, Tom, Stacy. In New York City, this past Wednesday, I had the honor of accepting the Carnegie Medal of Philanthropy on behalf of Mort. A few weeks ago, when we both knew that Mort was already too ill to travel, he asked me if I would stand in for him and call him immediately after the ceremony was over. And what a glorious affair it was, with hundreds of distinguished guests from all over the world. Mort would have loved it. The minute the ceremony was over, my phone rang. I thought it might be Mort. It was Steve telling me that Mort had just died. The coincidence sent chills up my spine. Mort planned everything in his life and even beyond. In choosing me as one of his eulogizers, he uncharacteristically didn't ask me for an advance copy to correct. I guess he trusted me because he knew how much affection I had for him. Anyone who knew Mort and heard him speak countless times about the influence of his parents, especially his mother, Rose, knew how much affection he had for her.
On a Monday evening, a few weeks after I joined the foundation in 2011, Mort and I went to his favorite Chinese restaurant, Li Wa, where the cost of dinner for two never exceeded $20. At one point during the dinner, he handed me an undated letter written in a combination of Hebrew and Yiddish, which his mother wrote to him. And he asked me to translate the letter for him while staying true to the flavor of the language. Here's part of what his mother wrote in her only extant letter, a letter that Mort kept for decades in his wallet, unable to read it. Morton, know that human beings are mortal, and since I'm getting older, I'm leaving you a letter so that you know what my wishes are. It is every individual's fate, whoever is born, must eventually leave the world. But Morton, if an individual is good, he is never lost to the world, because his good name remains forever. The letter goes on to insist that Mort and his brothers make sure to take care of their sister Miriam. It also gives instructions about how to support her synagogue. Among the many endearing qualities was Mort's tendency to easily be moved to tears. And this was the case in the Chinese restaurant when I read the letter to him. When the bill arrived for $18.75 for the two of us, Mort said, "You see, my mother also taught us to be frugal." In fact, frugality remained part of Mort's DNA. Until late in life, he bought economy class on planes and used his frequent flyer miles to get upgraded to business class. No matter how hard I tried to persuade him to travel to Israel first class or to buy United Airlines when it was in trouble, he resisted. Mort and his brothers contributed over $1 billion to causes in the United States and Israel, but Mort never indulged in the purchase of a yacht or a plane, as did many of his peers. To be clear, Mort and Barbara lived comfortably in beautiful art-filled homes, but they never flaunted their wealth. At the same time, talking about art, Mort always was interested in the welfare of young artists and supported artists both in the United States and Israel. He gave them not only their first check, but he also boosted their confidence in their profession. Mort was what I would call the ultimate thoughtful and strategic philanthropist. He did not write checks. He did not write only checks. He was intimately involved in every detail of new projects and contributed a great deal to their success. And he always asked, how will we know that the project succeeded? At the same time, when persuaded that the program was failing, he did not hesitate to close it down. Mort often related the story that in 1953, when he and his brothers felt that they were rich, which for them meant that they could pay their bills and support their mother, they created the charitable foundation. Jack, Joe, and Mort did everything together with only occasional friction. An Arabic saying goes like this: if having a brother was such a good thing, God would have created one for himself. Well, God had not met the Mandel brothers. Mort never stopped thinking and talking about how to achieve his goals. On an early trip to Israel with Mort, we always took the night flight, I asked him politely if he could stop talking for a while. He looked at me for a minute and he said, "Why?" I said, "I cannot keep up with your stream of ideas and I need to sleep." When I woke up a few hours later, there he was with his little brown notebook where he had jotted ideas that we needed to discuss before landing. Same on the way back. In the last 10 years or so, Mort declared that values trump intellectual firepower. He insisted that people be treated with respect, compassion, and dignity. He talked to everyone, was interested in them and their families, and was unfailingly gracious. I would like to mention something about the way Mort talked. His speech was peppered with erudite references. He was very particular about language, both in terms of what he said and wrote, and also in terms of what he read. He examined reports, protocols, and memos with a pencil in hand, making corrections large and small, always trying to improve the text. Mort was essentially an autodidact. He had enormous respect for formal and informal education. Many of you know, as Steve has already mentioned, that after the Six-Day War, Mort developed an intense relationship with the State of Israel. And with time, he also invested in Israeli businesses. But Mort particularly loved Jerusalem. It is especially meaningful, therefore, that his final major building project, the Israeli headquarters of the Mandel Foundation, is located in Israel's capital, Jerusalem. Citing the gorgeous building in Jerusalem's botanical gardens, close to the Knesset, was Mort's way of saying, "We have come to stay." The large crowd of Israeli dignitaries and Mandel staff felt so fortunate that Mort was able to participate via Skype in the pre-inauguration of the building on his 98th birthday. Once again, Mort was moved to tears and moved all of us as well. In our last conversation 8 days ago, Mort made me promise that the building would be both beautiful and, more important, comfortable for everyone who lived in that building. Draft number 43. Please pay attention. 43. Mort said it will get to 100. But draft 43 of the mission statement for the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel Foundation, which was largely drafted by Mort, says it all. The statement begins, to contribute to the flourishing of the United States and Israel as just, inclusive, compassionate, and democratic societies, and to improve the quality of life of all citizens in both countries. And he meant every word, as our work in both Israel and the United States attests. All citizen for Mort meant regardless of religion, color, gender, or ethnicity. So I quote his mother again, "Morton, if an individual is good, he is never lost to the world because his good name remains forever." The famous opera composer Giacomo Puccini was stricken with cancer when he was working on his opera Turandot, which some say was his best. He made his students promise that if he couldn't finish the opera, they would finish it for him. Shortly thereafter, he died. His protégés studied the opera carefully, and the piece was completed, the promise fulfilled. Puccini's favorite student, Arturo Toscanini, conducted the premiere. When the opera reached the point where Puccini had put down his pen, Toscanini stopped the music and put down his baton. With tears streaming down his face, he turned to his audience and said, "Thus far, the master has written." Then Toscanini picked up the baton again, smiling through his tears, and exclaimed, "But his students finished his work." And so I say, dear Mort, we are committed to continue your work. Yehi zichro baruch, may his memory be a blessing.
Professor Scott Cowan, Vice Chair Parkwood.
Mort Mandel was one of the most extraordinary business and philanthropic leaders of our time. We are all privileged to have been in Mort's orbit to benefit from his wisdom, experience, and inspiration. As for me, I was fortunate to have Mort as my teacher, my mentor, and most importantly, my friend, and the only person to ever refer to me as an adult as Boychek. I am devastated by his death. I thought Mort was indestructible, but I am so grateful, so grateful to having known him. As I reflect on my relationship with Mort, I have two vivid remembrances that epitomize Mort's charm, candor, and skill as a master strategist, innovative thinker, and highly effective leader. I first met Mort in 1986 when he invited me to join him for lunch. I was intimidated by the invitation because I had no idea why he wanted to meet with me. I was just a newly minted and inexperienced dean at Case Western Reserve University,
and he and his brothers, Jack and Joe, were already business and philanthropic icons. After an hour of small talk, Mort asked me if I would join the board of Premier, at that time one of the most successful pump companies in the United States. I was absolutely shocked by his request and asked what value I could possibly bring to the board. He smiled and said without hesitation, "I want your age." I was totally flummoxed by this response, but he went on to say that the average age of a board member was 62, and he needed me to lower the average. I then asked, "But what would you expect of me?" He smiled and said again, "Absolutely nothing." By now, I'm running out of questions, but I try one more and I say, "Mort, besides my age, is there anything else you want of me?" And he finally said yes. And then he added, "I just want you to attend board meetings, listen and learn, and maybe in 25 or 30 years, you might be helpful to me." Thus began my relationship with Mort Mandel, and my first lessons learned about leadership. Great leaders think out of the box, are brutally candid, but often charming, and have a long-term perspective. Now, there's a footnote to this story. Premier Industrial was sold in the late 1990s, and I wound up moving south and had little contact with Mort for 16 years. However, the first day after my retirement announcement as president of Tulane University, I got a call from Mort. And he just says one thing to me: "It's time for you to come back to Cleveland and help me." I will always cherish that call. And the Mort lessons learned: great leaders are patient, persistent, and have very long memories. My second remembrance occurred last month in what turned out to be my last meeting with Mort. After discussing various business matters, Mort and I had a philosophical discussion about life in general. At the end of the conversation, Mort said to me that his cup runneth over, and he was overwhelmed and humbled by how much people appreciated what he and his brothers had accomplished and done for others. Quite honestly, I could not respond because I was so emotional when I heard him say that. But there was another Mort lesson there. It's about being humble, self-reflective, and willing to give of yourself. When I think about that last conversation, I'm reminded of a quote by Mahatma Gandhi. It conveyed something like this: "A person's life is their message to the world." Mort's message to all of us was always clear and profound. Values matter. Character matters. People matter. Results matter. And above all else, repairing the world, the cum laude, matters. Another Mort lesson learned: when you make sure your life is worthy of an inspiring, impactful, and enduring message. Morton and his brothers repaired the world by investing in innovative ideas, focused on developing nonprofit leaders, strengthening communities, enhancing the humanities and humanity. These are the kinds of investments that will bear fruit for decades to come and to reinforce the genius and wisdom of Mort, Jack, and Joe. Mort's life and death has raised an existential question for me. That is, at the end of one's life, what is it that really matters? I am sure it is not about what you have done for yourself, but I am sure it is about what you have done for others. Mort always will be remembered as an outstanding business leader, but his enduring legacy will be for what he did for others. For those of us left behind, it is our responsibility to carry the torch for Mort in repairing the world. In doing so, we perpetuate and honor Mort's legacy and keep his life's message alive for us and those who follow. As I end, I have two other reminders. The ultimate lesson from Mort Mandel, which you have heard over and over today: life and success is all about the who. But it's about the who, because those are people with integrity, with trust, who you can always count on to do the right thing. The other reminder it is how much I respect and love Mort, and now miss my dear departed friend.
I'd like to introduce Steve Weinberg, nephew by marriage, son-in-law of Joseph Mandel.
I've had the privilege of serving under Mort's leadership on our family board, the Parkwood Corporation, since 1990. Tom and I were appointed at the same time. For the first 10 years, it was much like a graduate course. I listened and I learned. I learned about responsibility. I learned about organization, governance, and Menschlichkeit. Uncle Mort's principles were ever present. He was consistent, never deviating from his principles. He was always in control. Our seats were always assigned with our personalized notebooks at our place. The meeting started and ended on time, and no cell phones. 6 years ago, one of our trustees retired. I approached Mort after the meeting, and I said, "Mort, do you know who the second oldest person is on this board?" He said, "Who, you?" I said, "Yes." He says, "How old are you?" I said, "I just turned 70. 70? He said, "You don't know how young you are. Your best work is yet to come." Then, at 92, Mort was as energetic and productive as ever. He was the consummate leader, not necessarily interested in how many followers he could amass, but rather how many leaders he could create. In fact, he transformed the landscape of leadership in many ways. His Yiddish name was Mendel Lieb, which translates to a comforting heart. His philanthropic impact touched so many lives directly and indirectly. Essentially, that's what philanthropy is all about, a heart to help those in need. Now, if Penny or I needed something, we knew the drill. We called Donna. Donna would get back to us and say something like, "Mort can see you 3 weeks from tomorrow at 3:15. Unless it was important, something personal. Then it was right away. The same was true for our children, who sought his counsel. As busy as he was there for us when we asked. My family is appreciative of the precedent that he set for us. Though the bar is set very high, we'll do our best to adhere to the principles Uncle Mort lived by. Thank you, Uncle Mort, for your impact will always be with us.
Morton Barbara's eldest, Amy Mandel.
This is about my dad. And I want to give you a few little windows into our relationship. I was born in 1952, around the time when Dad's business and philanthropy were both taking off. And because of his intense involvement in and his passion for his work, he wasn't home a lot. And during those early years, even when he was home, he spent a lot of time working. But during those times when he was able to relax and be with us, he was incredibly warm, present, and funny. Although I didn't know him well in those years, I felt his love then and throughout my life. But, especially in childhood and young adulthood, I also experienced him as imposing and A+ isn't good enough demanding. As most of you know, he expected excellence and held a high bar for people he cared about. His intention with me, I know now, was to help me have a good and successful life. Sometime in the late 70s, early 80s, I decided it was finally time to come out to my parents as a lesbian, so I talked to them each individually. I have no idea what it felt like to them to hear this from me. They had by then gotten used to my somewhat radical politics and ways of living, but this was something different, and at that time, much more out of the mainstream. Parents can have a whole host of reactions, from worry to horror, or sadness, or disgust, or anger, or what do we do wrong? But my dad's reaction astounded me and says a lot about who he was and his growth and learning mindset. I wonder if you can guess what Mort did. He said, "Let's go for a walk." He wanted to know what it had been like for me and when I knew. He wanted to understand. He asked great questions and did not for 1 second make it about him. I don't remember many other details of that conversation, but the impact was huge. I felt seen and I felt loved. Over the last 10 years or so, Dad began to express to me the deep regret he had about the ways he hadn't been as present as he wished he could have been when my brother, sister, and I were growing up. He felt like he had missed a lot, missed out on having family life. So, being the mensch that he was, he embarked on a campaign of what I would call relationship repair. He initiated a series of regular phone calls with me during some periods as often as every 2 weeks, which is a lot when you think about his schedule. About 3 years ago, we switched to video calls, which made the calls even more impactful and enhanced our growing connection. It was during this period that I feel like I really got to know him. He inspired me in so many ways. One of the stated reasons for the calls from his end was to help me with my work. Starting in the late 80s, Mom and Dad did something wonderful. They made substantial funds from their family foundation available to my siblings and me to do our own philanthropy. This gave me the tremendous opportunity to marry my commitment to justice and activism with the ability to provide concrete resources to those on the front lines of social justice work. What an incredible privilege. As he saw my interests grow, he began to download all he had learned about best practices, and he had a lot to say. And this was a good thing, but the true value of these conversations was that we began to truly appreciate each other as adults and to understand our differing points of view. I had always thought we were so different, but fundamentally, we had a great deal in common. Another piece of the repair, and I don't know if this part was intentional, is that he began to underline how much he respected my thinking and that he had tremendous confidence in me, something I thought I would never hear from him. To have Morton Mandel think you are smart and do good work, that's a huge, huge deal. During every single phone call, he expressed how much he loved me, which went a long way. Thank you for that, Dad, and for so many other things. I'm one of the lucky ones in this world. I had the chance to have real closure and to feel complete in our relationship before his death. And by being in close relationship with him, I got to experience his joy in the belief that through his vision and persistence, he had been able to achieve at least a small part of his dream to make the world a better place. May we all have such an opportunity. May he be at peace, and may his memory be a blessing. Thank you.
Morton Barbara's son, Tom. I knew that by the time I got up here, second to last, that so many wonderful things would have already been said, and that you would have heard so much about his accomplishments, how well he was respected, how much he was loved, and how much he loved to build leaders. And when Steve and I were asked to join the board of Parkwood, we both sat with each other in our assigned seats and really learned a tremendous amount about business and life and growing up and building leaders ourselves. So I knew that you would have already heard so many wonderful stories. I thought I'd share a little bit about what it was like to live with my dad. And one of my stories starts when I was about 3 years old. We lived in a house in Cleveland Heights, and my dad brought home an exercise bicycle. I think he had been watching Jack LaLanne on TV, and he was convinced of the benefits of aerobic exercise, and he told me that was how he would live to be 100. Years later, when I was in high school, he now had a Schwinn Airdyne, and he was still pedaling 20 minutes a day every morning, promptly at 6 a.m. I never had to have an alarm when I was in high school because the wall of the house would start rumbling every morning exactly at 6 a.m., and it was him on his bicycle. Fast forward to about 5 years ago, Lisa and I were staying at the house, and promptly at 6 a.m., we start hearing disco music coming through the walls. And it was my dad with his personal trainer from the JCC doing step aerobics in the next room. He brought the same level of organization and attention to detail to his own personal life that he had brought to his professional life. He told me once that when he first came into the Army, that he discovered that they had a policy for every possible thing that you might need to do as a member of the Army. And it was all written down, and it was all reviewed regularly. And they would make changes as necessary, but there was a rule in place for every little detail of life in the Army. I'm sure that my colleagues who are working at Parkwood today can share the knowledge that it didn't start with Parkwood. It went back way before any of us were born. And so I know everyone here is familiar with my dad's professional and philanthropic life. He was very supporting of my business as well. And even though he always had a difficult time wrapping his head around a business where the inventory evaporates if it's unused, like airline seats, if you let them go unsold. I think I got an advanced business degree, though, just by hanging around him. And he gave me free access to the Brain Trust at Premier. Whenever I needed the help, all I had to do was call any of the vice presidents. You know, one of the biggest companies in America, one of the biggest privately held companies in America, and yet I could call the vice president of this or the vice president of that and ask them what they thought.
You know, how cool is that when you're running your own little business in Akron, Ohio? So about 2 weeks ago, he and I got an opportunity to spend a few hours of private time with each other. And we talked about everything we could think of. Naturally, he wanted to hear about my business. He wanted to hear what the good and the bad, and who the A's were and who the B's were. If you read the book, you understand what that is. And he wanted to know about my family. And we talked about Parkwood business as well. And we talked about his vision for the future of the foundation. And we also got a chance to say goodbye to each other. My dad was my best friend. He was my mentor. He was my business advisor. He was my confidant, and he was a grandfather to my kids. And then more recently, he's a great-grandfather a second time. And he darn well almost made it to 100. Jack LaLanne would have been proud. Thank you.
Morton and Barbara's youngest, Stacy.
As most of you noticed, I'm the only one up here without any notes. And my brother, he was coming down the stairs, he said, "You're the close-up hitter." And I essentially was thinking, I'm the closer. So what I wanted to talk about today, you've all heard about the wonderful things my father has accomplished in his life, professionally and philanthropically, and how many people respect him. But I want to talk about my Abba. He was an incredible father. I visited him often. I lived 3 blocks away. I couldn't not. And we spent time just sitting and talking. Him asking about my kids, about Keith, and about what I was doing in the state of the world and how it was deteriorating. He loved me unconditionally. And I loved him unconditionally. And on behalf of my mom and my sister and my brother, thank you all for being here to honor a very special human being who always said, "You're as old as you feel." When I'd complain I felt old, he said, "No, you're not old. You're like 40. So, which I'm not. Anyway, that's it. I miss my dad. And I will miss him for a long time. But his spirit lives within me. The morals, the values, and the integrity that he taught me will forever be part of my life and hopefully of my family's. Thank you.
Morton Mandel is mourned, remembered, and celebrated first and foremost by his beloved family, his dear Barbara, their children Amy, Tom and his wife Lisa, Stacy and her husband Keith, by their 8 grandchildren, Alicia, Daniela, Daniel, Sherilyn, Wilson, Jack, Lillian, and Olivia, their 2 great-granddaughters, Amora and Chloe, by nieces and nephews and great-nieces and great-nephews. If I've left anyone out, I apologize heartfeltedly. And of course, by an enormous community of friends, admirers, partners, colleagues, and the many, many people who never knew in person, but whose lives are transformed because of his wisdom, vision, and generosity. We come to the time for the memorial prayer, El Malei Rachamim. If you're able, we invite you to rise.
אל מלא רחמים, שוכן במרומים, המסי מנוחה נכונה תחת כנפיך שכינה, במעלות קדושים וטהורים, כי זו הרקיע המסעירים. את נשמת מנדלייב בן שמעון ושושנה, שהלך לעולמו בגן עדן דרך מנוחתו, אנא ברחמים אסתירהו בסתר כנפיך לעולמים, ותצרור בצרור החיים את נשמתו, אדוני הוא נחלתו, וינוח בשלום על משכבו, ונאמר אמן.
Compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Morton L. Mandel, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. God is his inheritance. May he rest in peace, and let us say, Amen. Friends, our concluding prayer is the Kaddish, a prayer in Jewish tradition associated with death and mourning, but a prayer which is an affirmation of life. Our tradition teaches us that we live on in many ways past our physical death. We live on through the generations of our family, if we're blessed to have them, through the deeds that affected the lives of others for good, and those that are inspired by our example. We live on in the causes and the institutions to which we invest our life's energies and which are larger and more significant and more enduring than our own individual selves. And we live on in the loving embrace of God, whose gift is life and in whose power all is possible. In these ways and more, Morton Mandel will always live among us, and his memory and his legacy will continue to inspire and to repair the world. We invite you to join in these words. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei rabbah, v'alma divrach yiratei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon v'chayedecho be'Yisrael, v'agala u'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei rabbah mevarach l'lam u'lamei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yetadar, v'yetaleh, v'yetalal, shemei dekudsha barichu, le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, da'amiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shemaya v'chayim, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace and peace to you who mourn, and comfort to those who are bereaved here and everywhere. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. Friends, our ceremony here is completed. Just brief announcements. Those who wish to visit with the family are invited to do so immediately following the service at the Jack Joseph and Morton Mandel School for Applied Social Sciences at 11235 Bellflower Road. Valet parking is available, and guests will be received until 5 o'clock. As well, tomorrow there will be guests welcome to visit from 5 to 9 p.m. at Tom and Lisa Mandel's home at 1655 North Medina Line Road in Akron. Please allow the family and their distinguished guests to depart first. Thank you so very much for joining on this sad but sacred occasion. Go in peace.